Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we step into one of the most mysterious, haunting, and psychologically complex cult tragedies in American history, a story that blends belief, manipulation, isolation, and a shocking final act that the world still struggles to understand. This is the chilling truth behind the Heaven's Gate cult and the 1997 mass suicide that stunned the world. Our story begins decades before that tragic night, in the early 1970s, when two people, Marshall Applewhite, a charismatic yet troubled man searching for meaning, and Bonnie Nettles, a nurse with deep spiritual curiosity, crossed paths and formed a partnership that would eventually lead to the creation of a group unlike anything seen before. Marshall, who would later be called Do by his followers, was a man who had survived personal crises, emotional turmoil, and a lifelong search for purpose. Bonnie, known later as T, believed she had been guided spiritually to meet Applewhite. Together, they developed a belief system centered around ascension, enlightenment, and the idea that human beings could leave their physical bodies to evolve to a higher, non-human level of existence. Their early teachings spread across the country as they traveled through small towns, parks, and community centers, attracting people who felt lost, disconnected, or spiritually unfulfilled. The duo preached that Earth was about to be recycled, and the only way to survive was to detach from physical life and join a higher evolutionary kingdom beyond the stars. They claimed they themselves were messengers sent to guide humanity toward this next level. Their followers, who became known as the class, gave up everything: homes, families, careers, possessions, in exchange for belonging to a group that promised spiritual elevation. Over time, the group became increasingly isolated. Members lived by strict rules: no drugs, no relationships, no families, no personal identity. They dressed alike, shaved their heads, and severed ties with the outside world. Everything was controlled: communication, clothing, daily routines, even thoughts. After Bonnie Nettles passed away in 1985, Marshall Applewhite faced a crisis. The group had believed that both leaders would ascend together in their physical forms. But Bonnie's death forced Applewhite to reinterpret their teachings. He changed the doctrine to say that the physical body was simply a vehicle, and the soul could exit it to join the next level. This shift became the foundation for what would eventually lead to the group's final act. In the 1990s, the group resurfaced, adopting new technology, creating websites, and using early internet tools to share their beliefs. They earned money building web pages for businesses and redesigning websites, which gave them financial stability. But behind the scenes, Applewhite's teachings were becoming darker, more urgent, and more apocalyptic. When the Hale-Bopp comet appeared in 1997, Applewhite believed it was the sign he had been waiting for, a cosmic signal that the next-level craft was arriving to take the group to a higher existence. He became convinced that the comet's arrival marked the final moment of opportunity. He told the group that their time on Earth was over and that their souls needed to leave their bodies to join the celestial craft he believed was hidden behind the comet. Over time, the group prepared for what they called graduation. They recorded farewell videos, expressing excitement, peace, and unwavering faith in their mission. They reassured families, explaining that this was not an act of despair but their chosen spiritual evolution. They purchased identical clothing, followed rituals, and prepared their living space carefully, believing everything needed to be pure, orderly, and ready for their transition. Then, in March 1997, the group carried out the final ritual, a coordinated mass exit that would shock the world. When authorities entered the house in Rancho Santa Fe, California, they found dozens of members lying peacefully, dressed identically, with calmness in the environment that contrasted painfully with the tragedy that had occurred. The discovery ignited global headlines, sparking questions that remain unanswered even today. How did a group of intelligent, educated adults, some with families, talents, and successful careers, fall so deeply under the influence of a belief system that led to their deaths? What psychological forces held them so tightly? How did loneliness, searching, identity loss, and the human desire for meaning make them vulnerable to a leader's control? Experts have since analyzed the group extensively. Psychologists describe Heaven's Gate as a powerful example of how isolation, emotional dependence, strict rules, and a charismatic leader can gradually dissolve personal identity. Social scientists emphasize that cults thrive when they provide structure, purpose, and belonging to people who feel misunderstood or disconnected from the world. Former members who left before the final event shared heartbreaking stories, how they believed they were doing something sacred, how they loved the group, how they struggled with doubts, and how leaving felt like tearing away a piece of their soul. Even after 1997, a few former followers continued to manage the group's website and answer messages from people curious about their teachings, a chilling reminder of the power that belief systems can hold. To this day, the Heaven's Gate tragedy stands as one of the most disturbing examples of how psychological manipulation, emotional vulnerability, spiritual searching, and isolation can combine to create a path that ends in devastation. It forces us to ask difficult questions about human nature, leadership, and the lengths people will go to find purpose, acceptance, and answers to life's biggest mysteries. Whether viewed through the lens of religion, psychology, sociology, or tragedy, the Heaven's Gate story remains one of the most shocking cult cases in history. Ladies and gentlemen, the story of Heaven's Gate is not just a tale of a cult, it is a cautionary reminder of how fragile the human mind can be when searching for meaning, how persuasive belief can become when guided by a charismatic leader, and how dangerous isolation can be when it replaces the outside world with a closed system of thought. It teaches us to stay grounded, stay connected, question the sources of our beliefs, and never allow ourselves to surrender our identity, independence, or critical thinking. Thank you for joining me on this deep exploration of one of America's most haunting tragedies. Until next time, stay aware, stay thoughtful, and stay safe.